There's a scar on the right side of my body. A pale, crescent-shaped line that feels numb to the touch, like a memory that's lost its sensation. The doctors told me it would fade, and it has, from an angry red to a soft, silvery white. But some scars, the ones you can't see, they don't fade. They throb with a phantom pain that no medicine can ever touch. My name is Clara, and I gave my sister a piece of myself. Not just a piece, an organ, a kidney. I watched them wheel her into the operating room ahead of me, her face pale against the starched hospital pillow, her hand giving a weak little flutter in my direction. My baby sister, Elena. And I would have walked through fire for her. I thought I had. The discovery, when it came, wasn't in a hospital. It was months later, on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday, in the quiet, sun-dusted chaos of my own home. I was looking for a staple remover, a mundane task for a cataclysmic revelation. It's funny, isn't it? How the world can split in two while you're rummaging through a junk drawer? The scent of lemon polish and yesterday's coffee lingering in the air? But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand the depth of the cut, you have to first understand the skin it pierced. Before the surgery, our lives were woven together, Alina's and mine, the threads of our histories tightly bound. We were the daughters of Arthur and Miriam, a quiet bookkeeper and a vibrant seamstress who had filled our childhood home with the smell of old paper and fresh linen. Our mother had passed 5 years earlier, a quiet fading from a heart that had simply given out from years of gentle, hard work. Her absence was a constant, quiet hum in the background of our lives. Elena was the sparkler, beautiful, impulsive, with a laugh that could light up a gloomy room. I was the steady candle, reliable, cautious, the one who remembered birthdays and checked the oil in the car. She was the artist. I was the accountant. She lived in a whirlwind of emotion and grand plans. I provided the calm eye of the storm. Our father, a man of few words since Mum's passing, looked at Elena with a mixture of awe and worry, and at me with a quiet, unspoken gratitude. I was the one who kept the ship steady. My own life was a tapestry of quiet contentment. My husband, David, is a solid, kind man whose love feels like a warm, heavy blanket on a cold night. Our 2 children, Sophie and Liam, were navigating the turbulent waters of adolescence. Their lives were a whirlwind of school projects and slammed doors. Our home was a lived-in, slightly cluttered haven filled with the detritus of a happy family. Soccer cleats by the door, a stack of mail on the counter, a faint permanent smudge on the wall by the light switch. Alina's life was different. She'd had a string of exciting but unstable jobs and relationships that burned bright and fast. She lived in a chic, minimalist apartment that always felt a little too perfect, a little too untouched, like a museum exhibit. She craved beauty, luxury, experiences. And I suppose I craved her happiness. I felt responsible for it, a mantle I had inherited from our mother. When the diagnosis came, polycystic kidney disease, the same silent thief that had taken our mother, it felt like a cruel, predetermined fate. Elena's sparkle dimmed. The vibrant woman who painted canvases with wild, bold colors became a gray ghost, tethered to a dialysis machine 3 times a week. I watched the life drain from her, along with the toxins her body could no longer filter. The decision was never a decision. I got tested. David held my hand. his brow furrowed with concern. "Are you sure, Clara? It's a major surgery." His voice was gentle, but the worry lines around his eyes were deep. I said, "She's my sister," as if that explained everything. And to me it did. The day of the surgery is a blur of bright lights and cold gurneys, of David's tight smile and the anesthesiologist's calm voice counting backwards from 10. I remember waking up in a different kind of pain, a deep internal ache, and my first slurred question was, "Elena? Is she okay?" They told me she was. The kidney was a perfect match. It was working. A profound, bone-deep relief washed over me, more potent than any painkiller. I had done it. I had saved her. The recovery was slow. The crescent scar on my side was tender, a constant reminder of the piece of me that was now living, working inside my sister. Elena's recovery was faster, more vibrant. The color returned to her cheeks. Her laugh, once again, echoed down the sterile hospital halls. She would come to my house, still moving carefully, but with a new light in her eyes. "Look at us, Clara," she'd say, squeezing my hand. "Part of you is literally keeping me alive. I can never, ever repay you." "You don't have to," I'd always reply. And I meant it. "You're my sister." She'd bring me little gifts, expensive teas, a soft cashmere throw for the couch. "For my hero," she'd say, her voice thick with emotion. I'd shush her, embarrassed, but a part of me glowed with the righteousness of it all. I had performed the ultimate act of love. I had proven the depth of my devotion in blood and tissue and scar. It was during this time, this period of convalescence and quiet bonding, that she first mentioned the necklace. "I was looking for Mum's emerald necklace the other day," she said one afternoon, sipping the tea she'd brought me. We were sitting on my back porch, watching the birds flit between the feeders. "The one with the diamond clasp. I wanted to wear it to a donor appreciation dinner the hospital is having, as a tribute to her, you know? But I can't find it anywhere. I think it might have been lost in the move to my new apartment." A faint, cold trickle of unease ran down my spine, but I dismissed it. The move had been chaotic. "Oh, Elena, that's a shame. It was so beautiful." "I know," she sighed, a genuine sadness in her voice. "It's gone. Just gone." I reached over and patted her hand. "It's just a thing, Lena. We have our memories." She gave me a watery smile. "You're right, as always." I believed her. Why wouldn't I? I had just given her a kidney. Why would I ever doubt her over a piece of jewelry? The memory of that conversation about the necklace faded, becoming just another thread in the fabric of our post-surgery lives. My body slowly knit itself back together. The sharp pulling pain in my side softened into a dull ache, and then into a mere awareness. I returned to work, to packing school lunches, to the gentle, predictable rhythm of my life. Elena's life, however, seemed to accelerate. She was thriving. She talked of new projects, new friends, a newfound zeal for living. I watched her with a quiet, deep-seated pride. My candle flame of a life had helped reignite her sparkler. It was a Thursday, I think, when the first real clue presented itself, not as a shout, but as a whisper. David was working late, and the children were at various after-school activities. The house was quiet. a rare and almost sacred silence. I decided to finally tackle the dreaded junk drawer in the kitchen, a chaotic graveyard of dead batteries, twisted paper clips, and takeout menus from restaurants that had long since closed. The drawer stuck, as it always did, and I had to jiggle it with a familiar, practiced motion. The sound was a rattling cacophony of our disorganized life. I was sifting through the debris, my fingers brushing against a cold, sharp staple, when I saw it, a small, crumpled piece of paper, wedged at the very back, behind a dusty roll of packing tape. It wasn't a receipt I recognized. It was from a high-end jeweler in the city, a place called Argent and Vert, whose elegant script I knew only from magazine ads. My first foolish thought was that David had bought me a gift, a surprise for my recovery, perhaps. A little thrill, warm and guilty, went through me. I shouldn't look. I should put it back. But curiosity, as it so often does, got the better of me. I smoothed the paper on the countertop. The date at the top made my breath catch. It was 2 weeks after our surgery. We had both still been home, wrapped in blankets, moving like careful, fragile dolls. The item description was chillingly specific. 1 Art Deco platinum necklace featuring a 3-carat Colombian emerald accented with baguette-cut diamonds. My mother's necklace. The one Elena said was lost. The world seemed to tilt, the familiar landscape of my kitchen sliding away. The price listed was a number that made my stomach clench. It was more money than I made in 3 months. Under transaction type, it was marked not as a consignment, but a straight sale, a final sale. I stood there for a long time, my fingers pressed against the cool granite of the countertop, the paper trembling in my hand. My mind, my reliable, logical mind, scrambled for a foothold. There has to be an explanation. Maybe she'd found it after she told me it was lost. Maybe she needed the money for medical bills. But the hospital bills were covered by her insurance. We'd discussed it. And if she'd found it, why not tell me? Why the secrecy? The sound of the garage door opening made me jump. David was home. I crumpled the receipt in my fist, shoving it into the pocket of my jeans, as if it were something illicit, something shameful. "Clara? I'm home," his voice called out, warm and familiar. "In the kitchen," I called back, my voice light, a skill I had perfected over a lifetime of keeping the peace. He came in, dropping his briefcase by the door and leaning in to kiss my cheek. He smelled of cold air and faint cologne. "What's wrong?" he asked immediately, his eyes, always so perceptive, scanning my face. "Nothing," I said too quickly. I turned to the kettle, filling it with water, my movements jerky. He was quiet for a moment, and I could feel his gaze on my back. "How's Elena? Did you talk to her today?" The mention of her name was like a physical blow. "No," I said, my voice tight. "Not today." I couldn't tell him. Not yet. To speak the suspicion aloud would make it real, would give it a shape and a weight it didn't yet deserve. This was between my sister and me, a thing of such intimate betrayal that I had to be sure, absolutely sure, before I let it out into the world, even to the man I loved most. The next few days were a study in forced normalcy. I smiled at my children. I went to work and stared at columns of numbers until they blurred. I cooked dinners and folded laundry, all while the crumpled receipt sat in my pocket like a live coal, burning a hole through the fabric of my reality. I watched Elena with new, haunted eyes. She came over on Saturday, bursting with energy. She was talking about a trip she and a new group of friends were planning. "It's just a week in Bali," she said, waving a hand as if it were a weekend jaunt to the countryside. "We found this incredible villa with a private infinity pool. I just feel like after everything, I need this. I need to truly live, Clara." Bali. The number on the receipt flashed in my mind. It would easily cover a week in a luxury villa. I said, my voice carefully neutral. "Bali? That sounds expensive." "Oh, you know," she said, picking at a thread on the cuff of her designer sweater. "I had some savings, and I just thought life is short, right? We of all people know that." She looked at me then, her eyes wide and sincere. And in that moment, I saw not just my sister, but a performance. The performance of a woman who had been given a second chance at life, funded by the deliberate, calculated sale of our mother's most treasured possession, a possession she had lied about, a lie she had told me while my body was still healing from the gift I had given her. The phantom pain in my side flared, a sharp, twisting ache that had nothing to do with healing tissue and everything to do with a breaking bond. The scar on my skin was nothing compared to the one beginning to form on my heart. The week that followed was the longest of my life. It was as if I was living two parallel existences. On the surface, I was Clara, the wife, the mother, the sister. I attended a parent-teacher conference for Liam. I helped Sophie with a history project on the Industrial Revolution. I made love to my husband with a quiet, desperate intensity, seeking the comfort of his solid, unchanging presence. But underneath, a cold, dark current was pulling me away from the shore of everything I knew. Every interaction with Elena was now layered with a subtext only I could hear. Her laughter sounded brittle. Her expressions of gratitude felt rehearsed. The way she would casually touch her side, the place where my kidney now resides inside her, felt like a claim of ownership, a reminder of a debt I had never wanted, but which she had seemed to so easily exploited. I became a secret archaeologist of my own life, digging through the past for clues I had missed. I remembered the small, offhand comments she had made over the years about our mother's old-fashioned taste. I recalled her fascination with wealth, with the trappings of a lifestyle that was so different from our middle-class upbringing. It wasn't a flaw, I had always told myself. It was just Elena, being Elena, her artist soul yearning for beauty. Now it looked like avarice, dressed in ambition's clothing. I couldn't confront her without more proof. The receipt was damning, but it was just a piece of paper. I needed to understand the why. I needed to see the full picture of her deception. So I did something I never thought myself capable of. I began to investigate my own sister. It started with a simple online search, Argent and Vert. Their website was a study of minimalist luxury. I found a contact number. My heart hammered against my ribs, my palm slick with sweat. A polished, impersonal voice answered. "Argent and Vert, how may I direct your call?" I have a question about a recent transaction. A necklace, an Art Deco emerald piece. I believe my sister, Elena Mitchell, sold it to you a few months ago. I'm helping her with her taxes and needed duplicate receipt for our records. The lie tasted like ash in my mouth. There was a click, and I was put on hold. The music was a soft, classical piece that seemed to mock my turmoil. Finally, a new voice came on the line, a man's, older, with a measured, confident tone. "This is Mr. Albright. I handle our more significant estate acquisitions. How can I assist you?" I repeated my fabricated story, adding, "She mentioned you were very professional and that the process was quite straightforward." "Ah, yes, Miss Mitchell," he said, and I could almost hear him nodding. "I remember the piece quite well. Exquisite. A family heirloom," she said. "It's a shame to see such things leave a family, but she was quite insistent on a quick, clean sale. No consignment. She needed immediate liquidity." Immediate liquidity. The phrase was so cold, so clinical. It wasn't about needing money for an emergency. It was a transaction. "She did mention that," I pressed, my throat tight. She was so relieved it was all handled before her trip. "Trip?" he asked, his tone neutral. "To Bali?" I ventured, a desperate fishing cast into the dark water. There was a slight pause, and I held my breath. "I wouldn't know about her travel plans, madam," he said, his voice now guarded, the professional veneer solidifying. "I simply facilitated the purchase. I can have a duplicate receipt emailed to the address we have on file for her." "No," I said too quickly. That's fine. Thank you for your time." I hung up, my entire body shaking. He hadn't confirmed Bali, but he hadn't denied it either. And he had confirmed everything else. The quick sale, the insistence on cash, the heirloom, so easily relinquished. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place later that night through the insidious modern window into other people's curated lives, social media. I rarely scrolled through it, but now I navigated to Elena's profile with a grim sense of purpose. Her page was private, but I was, of course, her friend. And there it was, a photo, posted just a day ago. Not of Bali, but a teaser. Elena holding up a passport with a mischievous smile. The caption? "Visa stamped. Paradise, here we come. So grateful for this second chance at life and the means to truly enjoy it. Hashtag blessed. Hashtag Bali bound. Hashtag new beginnings." The comments were a chorus of envious well wishes. "You deserve it. So happy for you. Live it up." I stared at the photo, at her radiant, smiling face. The phrase, "the means to truly enjoy it," seemed to blaze on the screen. The means. Our mother's emerald necklace, the one she told me was lost, the one she sold to fund her second chance, a chance I had given her with my own body while I was still recovering from the surgery that enabled it. The betrayal was no longer a suspicion. It was a fact, solid and immovable as a mountain. It wasn't just the lie about the necklace. It was the grotesque irony of it all. She was using the symbol of our shared heritage to celebrate the life I had saved, a life she was living in lavish, deceitful freedom, while I was left with a phantom ache and a shattered understanding of who she was. I closed the laptop. The silence in the room was deafening. I looked at the family photo on the wall across from me, a picture of me, Elena, and our parents, taken years ago at a beach. Our mother was wearing the emerald necklace, her smile gentle and proud. Elena, young and vibrant, had her arm linked through mine. I had thought our bond was unbreakable. I had proven it with flesh and blood, but she had treated it as a transaction. My sacrifice had not deepened her gratitude. It had, in some twisted way, given her the license to be reckless, to take what she wanted, believing that the ultimate gift absolved her of all smaller sins. The quiet, steady candle of my life was now a flame of cold, clear fury. I would not scream. I would not rage. But I could no longer pretend. The time for silent archaeology was over. It was time for a reckoning. The decision to act did not come in a thunderclap, but in the quiet, resolute stillness that follows a storm. The grief was still there, a heavy, sodden weight in my chest, but the shock had crystallized into something harder, something sharper. I would not let this lie fester in the dark. I would not become a silent, complicit victim of her betrayal. She needed to look me in the eye and acknowledge what she had done. I planned it with a cold precision that was foreign to me. I waited until the day of her flight. I knew from her incessant social media posts that she was flying out on a Friday evening. I called her that morning. My voice, to my own surprise, was light, almost cheerful. "Lena, good luck today. I know you'll have an amazing time." "Clara, oh my God, I'm running around like a mad woman. I'm so excited I could burst." "I was thinking," I said, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs, "why don't I come over before you leave? I have a little bon voyage gift for you. I can help you with any last-minute things."
There was a brief pause. I could almost hear the calculation. "You're so sweet, but are you sure? It's such a hassle for you." "No hassle at all," I said smoothly. "I'll be there in an hour." The drive to her apartment was a blur. I didn't turn on the radio. I sat in the silence, rehearsing nothing, because no rehearsal could prepare me for this. I parked and looked up at her building, a sleek, modern structure of glass and steel. It looked so clean, so untouchable, a perfect facade. She buzzed me in. Her apartment was, as always, impeccably tidy, but now strewn with the evidence of imminent travel. A half-packed carry-on, a new sun hat on the sofa, a passport and ticket on the glass coffee table. She looked vibrant, tanned already from a sunbed, dressed in expensive-looking linen. "Clara," she said, pulling me into a quick, perfumed hug, "you shouldn't have gotten me anything. You've already given me everything." She gestured dramatically to her own body, to the place where my kidney was. The irony was so thick I could taste it, metallic and sour. I forced a smile and handed her a small wrapped box. It was an expensive bottle of sunscreen, a brand I knew she liked, a prop. "You're too much," she gushed, setting it aside without opening it. "Look at this place, a disaster. I just need to finish packing my toiletries and I'm out of here." "This won't take long," I said, my voice calm, though my hands were ice cold. I walked over to the coffee table and picked up her passport, feigning interest. "Bali, I'm so jealous. It looks incredible." "It's going to be a dream," she sighed, heading towards the bathroom. "I'll just be a sec." This was my moment. I set the passport down and reached into my own bag. I pulled out the receipt from Argent and Vere. I didn't crumple it this time. I had pressed it flat. It looked even more official, more damning. I placed it squarely in the center of the glass table, right where her ticket had been. Then I waited. She came out of the bathroom, a cosmetic bag in her hand. "Okay, I think that's—" Her words died in her throat. Her eyes had landed on the receipt. The color drained from her face so completely, as if someone had pulled a plug. Her carefully applied makeup stood in stark, garish patches. For a long moment, there was only silence. The hum of the refrigerator seemed to grow louder. "Clara,"
she whispered. What is that? You tell me, Elena. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the air like a shard of glass. She stared at it, her body rigid. I saw a dozen emotions flit across her face: shock, fear, and then a swift, calculating defiance. Where did you get that? It was in my junk drawer. Funny, the things that turn up. She swallowed hard, her eyes darting from the paper to my face and back again. I can explain. I'm listening. She took a shaky breath, her performance instincts kicking in. I found it after I told you it was lost. It was in a box of winter scarves. I was going to tell you, but then I thought about the medical bills and the recovery, and I just needed the money. I was stressed, Clara. You don't understand the pressure. I just looked at her, letting her lies hang in the air, brittle and transparent. The date on the receipt is 2 weeks after our surgery, Elena. The hospital bills were covered. You told me you were covered. I took a step closer. And you told Mr. Albright you needed immediate liquidity for a quick, clean sale. Those were his words. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The last of her defenses crumbled. The defiance in her eyes was replaced by a flash of pure, undiluted panic. I saw your post, too. I continued, my tone still lethally calm. So grateful for the means to truly enjoy it. Our mother's necklace was the means, wasn't it? The necklace you told me was lost. You sold our mother's legacy to pay for a vacation. It wasn't just a vacation, she burst out, her voice rising to a shrill pitch. It was a rebirth. I almost died, Clara. I deserved this. I deserved to do something extravagant, to live a little. That necklace was just sitting in a box gathering dust. Mom would have wanted me to have it. She would have wanted me to be happy. There it was, the core of her entitlement, the stunning selfishness that had been hiding beneath a lifetime of charming impulsivity. Mom would have wanted you to be happy, I repeated slowly, letting each word sink in. But would she have wanted you to be a liar? Would she have wanted you to steal a piece of our shared history and sell it behind my back while you were telling me how grateful you were for the organ I just gave you? The word liar seemed to physically strike her. She flinched.
I didn't steal it. It was mine as much as yours. Was it? I asked, my voice dropping to a whisper. Because it feels like you stole something from me, Elena. You didn't just sell a necklace, you sold my trust. You sold the meaning of what I did for you. You made my sacrifice into a down payment on your villa in Bali. Tears were streaming down her face now, but they were tears of frustration, of being caught, not of remorse. You don't understand. You've always had your perfect little life with David and your perfect little kids and your perfect little house. You don't know what it's like to want more. I looked at my sister, truly looked at her, and I saw a stranger, a hollow woman who confused wanting with deserving, who saw love as a currency and family heirlooms as disposable income. I picked up the receipt from the table. I folded it neatly and put it back in my pocket. Enjoy your trip, Elena, I said, and I turned and walked towards the door. Clara, wait, she cried, her voice desperate. You can't just leave. We're sisters. I stopped at the door, my hand on the cool metal of the knob. I didn't turn around. Are we? I asked softly. Then I opened the door and walked out, leaving her standing in the wreckage of her perfect, empty apartment.
The drive home was a numb autopilot journey. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I felt a strange, hollowed-out calm, as if the confrontation had scooped out all the roiling emotion and left behind a clean, empty space. I had said what I needed to say, I had held up the mirror, and she had been forced to look at her own reflection. There was nothing left to do. I walked into my house, the familiar scent of home, of lemon cleaner, and the faint, sweet smell of the apple candle I kept on the mantel washing over me. David was in the living room, reading a book. He looked up, and his smile faded the moment he saw my face. "Clara?" He put down his book, his whole body tensing with concern. "What happened? Are you okay?" And that's when the dam broke. The calm shattered, and a sob raw and ragged tore from my throat. I didn't have to say a word. He was across the room in 2 strides, wrapping his arms around me, holding me as my body shook with the force of a grief I had been containing for weeks. I led him to the sofa, and through hiccuping, broken sentences, I told him everything: the receipt, the jeweler, the Bali trip, the confrontation. I showed him the crumpled piece of paper, this tiny, insignificant thing that had detonated my world. I watched his face cycle through confusion, disbelief, and then a slow, burning anger that was all the more potent for its quietness. "That's selfish. How could she?" he finally said, his voice low and tight. He pulled me closer. "After what you did for her. My God, Clara, I'm so sorry." Hearing his validation, his shared outrage, was a balm. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. The betrayal was as profound as it felt. "Don't you dare blame yourself for a second," he murmured into my hair. "This is on her. All of it." The next few days were a strange limbo. Elena did not call. She did not text. Her social media, however, told a different story. From the other side of the world, a stream of glossy, filtered images began to appear. Elena laughing on a pristine beach. Elena silhouetted against a spectacular sunset, a cocktail in her hand. Elena floating in the infinity pool of a villa that looked like a palace. The captions were all variations on a theme. "Living my best life," "Gratitude is the attitude," #blessed. Each post was a fresh twist of the knife. It was her final brazen act of the performance. She was showing me, showing the world, that she felt no shame, that her happiness, her rebirth, was worth any cost. The comments from her friends, "You go, girl," so inspiring, were a chorus of unwitting accomplices. I didn't engage. I didn't comment, but I did something I had never considered before. I screenshotted them. Every single one. I saved them in a folder on my computer, a digital record of her celebration, funded by her deceit. It was David who gently broached the next step. "Your dad," he said one evening over dinner, after the kids had left the table. "He should know." "I can't," I whispered. "It will break his heart." "He'll find out eventually," David said. "And it's better he hears the truth from you, calmly, than from a hysterical Elena when she gets back and realizes the game is up." He was right. I knew he was right. So the following Sunday, I drove to my father's small, neat bungalow alone. He was in the back, pottering amongst his rose bushes, a flat cap on his head against the mild sun. He looked up and smiled, a simple, uncomplicated expression of pleasure at seeing me. "Clara, love, this is a nice surprise." "Hi, Dad." I kissed his cheek, the familiar scent of earth and old spice filling my senses. We sat inside and I made tea, my hands steady as I poured the boiling water. We sat at his small kitchen table. the one my mother had chosen 30 years ago. "Dad," I began, my voice soft but clear, "there's something I need to tell you about Elena." I told him the story, just as I had told David. I showed him the receipt. I didn't show him the screenshots from Bali. He didn't need that visual cruelty. I watched as the light in his eyes, the gentle contentment, slowly dimmed. He didn't interrupt. He just listened, his gnarled hands resting on the tablecloth, his shoulders slumping lower and lower with every word. When he finished, he was silent for a long time, staring out the window at his beloved roses. "The emerald necklace," he said, finally, his voice raspy with emotion. "Your mother wore that on our wedding day. She was so proud of it." He looked at me, and his eyes were filled with a deep, weary sadness. "I don't understand, Clara. Why would she lie? Why wouldn't she just ask for help if she needed money?" "I don't know, Dad. I think she just wanted it, and she didn't want to be told no." He nodded slowly, absorbing the truth of his youngest daughter's character. He reached out and covered my hand with his. It was warm and rough.
"And you," he said, his gaze intense, "you gave her a part of yourself. And she does this?" He shook his head, a single tear tracing a path through the wrinkles on his cheek. "I am so sorry, my dear girl. You deserved better. You have always been the better one." His words, his unwavering belief in me, were a profound comfort. The secret was out in the family. The weight was no longer mine to carry alone. The consequence was no longer a private wound. It was now a family truth. And I knew, with a cold certainty, that when Elena returned from her paradise, she would be returning to a very different landscape than the one she had left. The 2 weeks of Elena's vacation felt like a prolonged, suspended breath. The world kept turning. Sophie aced her history exam. Liam's soccer team won their championship. David and I celebrated our anniversary with a quiet dinner, our hands linked on the table, a silent understanding passing between us, that our bond was the bedrock upon which I could rebuild. But the anticipation of Elena's return was a low, constant hum of dread. I had no idea what to expect. Would she come back repentant? Or would she be armed with new justifications, her tan a shield against our accusations? She returned on Sunday. I knew because her social media feed, after a final glorious sunset post, went silent. The performance was over. The actor was coming off the stage. The silence from her was more unnerving than any post. The call came on Monday evening. It was my father. "She's here," he said, his voice heavy. "She came over, full of stories, souvenirs. She asked why you weren't answering her texts." He paused. "I told her we needed to talk, all of us. Tomorrow night at my house." My heart thudded against my ribs. "Okay, Dad." He said, "Clara?" His tone firm in a way I rarely heard. "I will handle this." The following evening, I walked into my father's bungalow with David by my side, his presence a solid wall of support. The air in the small living room was thick and still. My father was sitting in his worn armchair, a king on a weathered throne. Elena was on the sofa, perched on the edge, her Bali tan making her look vibrant and out of place in the muted room. She had a carefully composed, wounded expression on her face. "Clara," she began, her voice a theatrical tremor. "I don't understand what's going on. Why have you been ignoring me? Dad's being so cryptic." My father held up a hand, stopping her. "Sit down, Clara,"
David." He waited until we were seated. I thought he looked old. I thought, older than I had ever seen him, but there was a steely resolve in his eyes that I recognized from my childhood, the look he got when a matter of principle was at stake. He turned his gaze to Elena. "Your sister told me what happened. About the necklace." Elena's mask of confusion slipped for a fraction of a second, revealing a flash of pure panic before she reassembled it. "The necklace? Dad, that was a misunderstanding. I already explained to Clara." "You lied, Elena," my father interrupted, his voice quiet but absolute. "You told your sister it was lost. You sold your mother's most treasured possession, a piece of our family history, and you used the money for a holiday." "It wasn't just a holiday," she cried, the same desperate defense she'd used on me. "I was celebrating life. After almost dying, don't I deserve that? Mom would have—" "Do not," my father said, his voice cracking like a whip. "Tell me what your mother would have wanted." The force in his tone stunned her into silence. He leaned forward, his hands gripping the arms of his chair. "Your mother was integrity. She was honesty. She worked her fingers to the bone to provide for you girls, to give you a good life. She would be ashamed of what you've done. Ashamed." The words landed with the force of a physical blow. Elena recoiled as if she'd been slapped. All the color drained from her tanned face. "The worst part," he continued, his voice trembling with emotion, "is what you did to your sister. Clara gave you a kidney. She went under the knife for you. She put her own health, her own life at risk for you. And you repay that sacred gift with a lie? With theft?" You spat on her sacrifice. "I didn't," she sobbed, real tears now, tears of shame and exposure. "It wasn't like that." "It was exactly like that," David spoke, his voice low and firm from beside me. I reached for his hand, gripping it tightly. "You exploited her love, and you betrayed her trust in the most calculating way imaginable." The room was silent, except for Elena's ragged weeping. She looked from our father's stony disappointment to David's cold anger, and finally to me. Her eyes were pleading, but I felt nothing. The well of my sympathy for her had run dry. My father sighed, a sign of profound exhaustion. "I cannot force you to be a good person, Elena. I can only tell you that your actions have consequences. You have broken this family. You have broken the trust between us." He looked at her, his gaze unwavering. "Until you can demonstrate genuine, lasting remorse, not just tears because you were caught, you are not welcome in this house. I do not want to see you. I do not want to hear your excuses." She stared at him, her mouth agape in utter shock. This was the consequence she had never anticipated. The disowning, the withdrawal of a father's love. It was a more devastating blow than any anger could ever be.
You can't mean that," she whispered. "I have never meant anything more in my life," he replied softly. She stood up, her body shaking. She looked at me one last time, a look of pure, bewildered hatred, as if I were the architect of her downfall. Then, without another word, she turned and fled from the house, the slam of the door echoing in the quiet room. The three of us sat in the aftermath. The air was thick with sorrow, but it was a clean sorrow, the kind that follows a necessary amputation.
My father looked at me, his eyes full of a grief that mirrored my own. "I am so sorry, Clara," he said again. "It's not your fault, Dad," I said, and I meant it. The public consequence was complete. The truth was known. The justice, while painful, had been served. There was no victory in it, only a bleak, solemn clarity. The sister I thought I had was gone. Now, the long, slow work of healing could truly begin. The silence that followed Elena's exile was not an empty one. It was a silence of recalibration, of the earth settling after a quake. The space she had occupied in our lives, the frantic phone calls, the dramatic visits, the constant need for validation, was now vacant. And in that vacancy, a different kind of life began to grow. The first few weeks were the hardest. The phantom pain in my side would flare up at unexpected moments, no longer a reminder of the organ I'd lost, but a somatic echo of the relationship I'd lost with it. I'd find myself reaching for the phone to tell her a funny story about the kids before the reality would crash down, a small, fresh grief each time. But with David and my father's steadfast presence, the grief began to transform. It was no longer a sharp stabbing thing, but a dull ache I learned to carry. I started therapy. I talked about the weight of being the reliable one, the caretaker, and how that role had perhaps blinded me to the deeper currents of entitlement running through my sister. I began to understand that my sacrifice, while born of pure love, had also been a form of ultimate enabling. I had to forgive myself for that, for not seeing it, for giving so freely to someone who valued the gift so little. One Saturday morning, I was cleaning out the hall closet, another mundane task that seemed to hold new meaning. I found a box at the back, tucked behind winter coats. It was filled with my mother's sewing patterns and fabric swatches. As I lifted them, a small, flat box, the kind from a jeweler, fell from between the folds of a silk remnant. My breath caught. I knelt on the floor and opened it. Inside, nestled on faded velvet, were a pair of earrings, small, delicate sapphires set in silver, my mother's birthstone. They weren't as grand as the emerald necklace, but they were hers. A piece of her that Elena's greed had not touched. I held them in my palm, their cool weight a comfort. This was the legacy. Not the single most valuable item, but the small, quiet pieces of a life well lived. The love stitched into every hem, the patience in every button sewn back on. I wasn't the steady candle because I was boring. I was the steady candle because I held the light. That afternoon, I went to my father's house. I found him in his garden, talking to his rose bushes as he often did. I showed him the earrings. A soft smile touched his lips. He loved those, he said. They were like having a little piece of the sky with her. He looked at me, his eyes clear. She would have wanted you to have them, Clara. You're the one who understands what they mean. It was a moment of profound healing, a reclamation. Months turned into a year. The seasons changed. I focused on the life in front of me. I watched Sophie blossom into a thoughtful young woman, her empathy a quiet strength. I cheered for Liam on the soccer field, his uncomplicated joy a tonic. My marriage with David deepened into a new, quieter intimacy, forged in the fires of shared hardship. I heard snippets about Elena through the distant, tangled vine of extended family. She had moved cities, changed jobs again. The narrative was that she was thriving, but it had the same brittle, performative quality as her social media posts. She was a sparkler, after all, burning bright and fast, and eventually they always fizzle out. I felt a distant pang of pity, but no desire to reconnect. Some bridges, once burned, cannot and should not be rebuilt. On the anniversary of our surgery, I did something I had been putting off. I went to the quiet cemetery where my mother was buried. I hadn't been since before the operation. I sat on the bench near her headstone, the spring grass bright and green around me. "I gave her a kidney, Mum," I said aloud, the words carried away by the gentle breeze. "And she sold your necklace." It was the first time I had said it here to her. A confession and an absolution all at once. I waited, half expecting a sign, a feeling. But there was only the rustle of leaves and the distant song of a bird. And in that ordinary, peaceful silence, I found my answer. My mother's love had never been in the emerald. It was in the strength she had given me to endure, and the moral compass she had instilled in me that knew instinctively when a line had been crossed. The betrayal had been a theft, but it had not taken what was most important. It had not taken my family, my husband, my children, my father. It had not taken my integrity. It had not taken my capacity to love, even if that love was now guarded, wiser. I stood up, the sapphire earrings warm in my ears. I touched the cool marble of my mother's headstone. "I'm okay, Mum," I whispered. "I'm really okay." And for the first time since I found that receipt, I knew it was the absolute truth. The healing was not about the scar fading. It was about learning to live with its presence and realizing it had not weakened me, but had instead outlined my strength in a silver line. And so that is my story, a story I never thought I would have to tell. I sit here now in the quiet of my home, and I can finally look at that crescent-shaped scar not as a wound, but as a reminder of the depth of love I am capable of giving, and a harder, wiser reminder of the importance of giving it to those who truly value it. The greatest lesson I learned from all of this was that family is not just about blood. It's about character. It's about trust. It's about the quiet, unwavering people who stand by you not just in a crisis, but in the long, slow aftermath, helping you pick up the pieces of your peace. I sometimes wonder if I had known how it would all unfold, would I have still gone through with it? Would I have still given her my kidney? And I think I would have. Because my act was about who I am. Her act was about who she is. And I rather live as the person who gave too much than live as the person who took it all for granted. But that is a choice each of us must make for ourselves. And so I want to ask you, from my heart to yours, what is the line for you? When does love become exploitation? When is it right to protect your own peace, even if it means walking away from family? I share my story here in the hope that it might bring some comfort or clarity to any of you who have felt the unique pain of a betrayal from someone you thought you knew. Your feelings are valid. Your peace is precious. Guard it. Thank you for listening to my story. If this has resonated with you, please share your own thoughts in the comments below. Your support and this community mean more than you know.